Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've made it. We've made it to a weekend. It's happy Friday time here at John Martin Talks. Yeah, I'm going fishing after the show, and I hope you have a great weekend as well. I can tell you, someone who is not going to have a good weekend, and that is Steve Bannon. Now, a lot of conservative shows aren't covering this, it doesn't seem like, but late yesterday it broke that Steve Bannon has been arrested, and we'll get into to all the details of that in just a moment. And then we're going to do a story about the mail system, of course. It's all in the news. The DNC's whole convention has basically been about the post office. It's amazing how much attention the post office is getting these days. But there's been some new polling come out, and Biden supporters are twice as likely to vote by mail come November 3rd than Trump supporters, and we'll talk about that. And then we're going to talk about Hollywood a little bit. Oh, Cher, if we have time. Yes, Cher, the proverbial entertainer, has tried to volunteer at the post office and essentially got fired before she ever got hired. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of the show, I always want to start out with some really good news, and that is about our giveaway. Our prize pack here, as you'll see pictured. We're giving this away. This is compliments of our sponsor, Big Daddy Unlimited, otherwise known as BDU. There's a couple of links in the description of our show. It doesn't matter where you're watching us, whether it be on Facebook, good morning, howdy, how are you? Whether you're on America's Voice News, download free apps, Apple TV, the Apple phone, the iPhone, the Android, all this technology sometimes gets to me. They're streaming on Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV. We're on channel 219 Dish Network now, man. We are literally going universal, and we're also on the Pluto streaming channel through America's Voice News. But wherever venue you're watching, also remember YouTube, spell it out, John Martin Talks. You can win this prize pack. All you have to do is go to the description of our show. It says John Martin Giveaway. There's a link there. Follow the instructions, and you too, one lucky listener, will win this prize pack at the end of the month. And this is compliments of our sponsor, Big Daddy Unlimited. So if you want to help the show and help yourself as well, check out Big Daddy Unlimited, our sponsorship link in that same description of our show I was telling you about. There's a free trial. It's virtually free. I say free, but 99 cents, man. That's couch cushion money. You can get a free trial. And if you have any interest in anything to do with the Second Amendment, from guns, ammunition to tactical gear, or hunting deer for that matter, or swag that has something to do with the Second Amendment, like this giveaway, go to Big Daddy Unlimited. Follow the instructions there. You will save more money. You will be amazed at how much change you can actually spend, so to speak. You will save in purchasing something through BDU, and you'll be helping John Martin Talks at the same time. So I wanted to get that out of the way, and we'll come back to that as the show progresses. But I got an admission to make to you. I hate to say it, I kind of predicted this the last few days. You know, I've been bringing you not daily coverage of the nightly DNC convention, and it has been hard, man. It has really been hard for me. Boring is not even descriptive enough. But yes, I have to admit, I fell asleep last night during the DNC convention, so I can't really tell you a whole lot about Biden. I taped all the stuff. I'm going to review it, and if it's still news come Monday morning, we'll review the whole thing. But it has been tough. I've tried to be a trooper for you. It's just been tough. So we're going to bring you some other stories, and we start with an MSNBC story that does my heart no joy to bring to you, and that is about Steve Bannon. Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon arrested on fraud charges in border wall fundraising scheme. Now, before I go any further, I do need to give you a little caveat here. I personally have never met Mr. Bannon. I've been up and down on him as a fan of his. I mean, when he was pushing Trump in the beginning, man, I really loved him. I liked Breitbart, that he was one of the co-founders, I believe, of that, or certainly one of the instrumental people. I like that network. I have to say that, as I say, I've never actually met him, but we are comrades of such on America's Voice News. He does a show on there. I do a show on there. So I want to say all that before I get into the nuts and bolts of this. I have also noticed that conservative networks, and I listened to a few of them, have been reluctant to talk about this story because I think they don't want to criticize Steve Bannon, who is somewhat of a pioneer in this business. And I feel that, but in all honesty, I feel like I need to cover it as well. So I know there's a lot of Bannon fans in the audience out here. As I say, I have been one at times. I've faltered a bit in when he kind of, in my opinion, I don't know if backstabbed the president. That's probably too harsh. But he seemed like he wanted to profit over the president at one point. And so I got a little bit of mixed feelings. But let's get into it. Former White House Chief of Staff strategist Steve Bannon was arrested Thursday after being charged with defrauding hundreds of thousands of donors through his We Build the Wall. Let me adjust this just a second here. Dangers of live TV. We Build the Wall fundraising campaign. Now, let me tell you, and I'll tell you, I'll explain this in just a moment. But the one thing that is absolutely true is that the mainstream media, the leftists that control the media, boy, were they overjoyed yesterday afternoon when this story began to break. I mean, they were literally giddy over this because as much as they hate Donald Trump and they hate MAGA hat wearing people, they may hate Steve Bannon even more, because whether it's 100% true or not, or 50-50, they actually believe that Steve Bannon is one of the main reasons that Hillary Clinton lost. And it's hard to argue that he wasn't very instrumental in that. He essentially put together the campaign of the MAGA agenda with President Trump's campaign. And he brought, I believe I'm correct on this, he's kind of the one that pushed Kellyanne Conway up to the front, which, she made historic, which, by the way, is really interesting if you think about it. Kellyanne Conway is the first, I'm quite sure I'm right on this, the first woman to ever successfully lead a presidential campaign to the White House. Yet she gets no credit from that. She doesn't even get that much credit from places like Fox News and stuff. But she deserves a ton of credit. She gets no credit from the women's movement. In fact, she gets attacked on a routine basis, and she doesn't deserve that, which, I just wanted to bring that out. But back to Steve Bannon, there's no question that he was instrumental in helping President Trump get elected. And President Trump rewarded him by making him one of his top advisors. And, they soured there a bit. I personally think, just based on my observation, the things I hear that Bannon was, becoming too big for his britches, so to speak, that he was trying to steal the spotlight as much, if not more, from the president. I don't know if that's true, but it certainly seems to be true. But the left, man, oh, wow. They are simply over the top gushing about this news. Now, if guilty, if Bannon is guilty, this is not good. Not only obviously for him, but it's not good for the movement. It's not good for the president, although the president is not involved in any of this, and we'll get into specifics of that in a moment. But if Steve Bannon and some of the other people here are guilty of this, it's not a good thing. It hurts the cause. It hurts little old shows like me, because here I am asking you to sponsor me, help, or go to my sponsorship link, and I'm going to ask you that in spite of all this. Go to Big Daddy Unlimited sponsorship link in the John Martin Talk Show. Help me out. I really need your help, and you'll be helping yourself, as I talked about at the top of the show. But it does hurt because it puts a little bit of skepticism in your mind. And I get that. I understand that. So, and I'm not saying that Bannon is guilty. I'm simply saying, if true, it hurts the cause. It certainly doesn't help the president. Even though the president is not connected to this in any way, shape, or form, it certainly doesn't appear that way. In fact, President Trump, and we'll talk more specifically about this in a moment, actually was opposed to some of the things that were happening with this group about building the wall. And we'll get into that in a minute. But it absolutely does not help the president. It doesn't. And that, to me, is the biggest thing there is. This president has enough on his shoulders and enough things working against him without, troopers in the cause, fighters in the cause. And there's no question about this. Steve Bannon is a major fighter in the MAGA agenda cause. There's just no other way to you can't sugarcoat that. Bannon and 3 associates were indicted in a federal investigation in the Southern District of New York. Prosecutors alleged the 4 defrauded donors by raising more than $25 million to build a wall along the southern border of the United States. But some of that money was used for personal gain. Now, they mentioned the Southern District of New York. If that rings a bell, they've been pretty busy. This is the district that has been after Trump's financial records, and he is going back and forth with them, Supreme Court decisions, all kind of things, still tied up in the court. There was a little bit of news about that today. President Trump, I think, was denied an appeal. It's still going through process, and it'll probably last long after the election is over. But the Southern District is no friend to Donald Trump. And I'm not saying they're doing this for a vendetta, but, I just report the facts. Kind of you decide on this. But let me just shake this up for you. Of essentially, you probably heard, if you're tuned into our audience, I would assume you've heard a little of this already. But let me just put it in a kind of a nutshell. There was a group, and this is the group that is being charged in this, that put together a Build the Wall fund on some private property. They got permission from some landowners along the U.S.-Mexican border, and they're building a private wall there to ultimately, I suppose, connect to an eventual wall being built by the U.S. government. And there's a gentleman at the center of this, his name we'll talk about in just a minute, who was a military veteran that lost both of his legs while in the service of us, the American people. And I'm not besmirching anybody, I'm just talking about the facts. And he was kind of the face of this, building the wall. And basically what these charges are saying is that some of the money, not all of it, because they've built some wall down there, there's no question about that, that some of this money was diverted to people living lavish lifestyles and that kind of thing. And they're also accusing Mr. Bannon of using some of the money in a foundation to pay personal expenses. And let me just tell you real quickly about foundations, because a lot of people hear such and such a foundation, they don't really understand it. There is a reason. I'll just give you the best example I can think of. While all these professional athletes and movie stars and stuff like that, people who make a lot of money, they create foundations. There's a reason for that. And I'm not bemoaning foundation. I'm not lumping them all into a basket, but they are in a basket in the sense of how they're treated by taxes and that kind of thing. And all these athletes come to Florida. That's one reason I know it, because we don't have an income tax. But if you have a foundation, as I understand it, you can put tons of money into that foundation, and then you can, if you're going like a professional athlete, you're going to a charity event, and you happen to play golf at the same time, you can pay for all your expenses of flying to that event through your charity. Like, for instance, I guarantee you, if you look at like the Kobe Bryant situation in that helicopter he was flying, I would bet you that a lot of the expenses that were entailed in using that helicopter probably came through some foundation he's doing. That is not to knock it. I'm just explaining it. So they create these foundations. Apparently Bannon has one, and he was using money in that foundation for personal expenses, which is not against the law, but if you're lying about how the money comes in and you're playing shenanigans, it is. I'm not accusing him of that. They are. The United States Postal Service was also, Postal Inspection Service also assisted in the investigation. So, it's in the news, right? Others in the indictment are Timothy Shea, a 49-year-old from Colorado accused of owning a shell company that kind of did all this. Brian Kofilich, he's the veteran I was talking about, a disabled Iraq war veteran. I remember when he first kind of came on the scene, because he was jumping around to various different organizations and, is treated as he should be, as a hero. And Andrew Bardoletto, who, according to his own website, was a contributor to Breitbart News. I guess that's probably the Bannon connection, the conservative publication Bannon used to run. Now, if this is true, if any of this is true, It is indeed a sad day for multiple reasons, some of which I just explained. I mean, it's sad if people were defrauded out of money. It's sad if a noble cause like building the wall is tainted in any way. It's certainly sad if the reputation of this well-deserved hero of America that literally gave life and limb for his country, so to speak, if his reputation, deserve it or not, is tarnished by this. I mean, it is a very sad day. It's a sad day because the left, always looking for ammunition, has been given some of this. Not saying Mr. Bannon is guilty, but it definitely is a sad day right now. The campaign was intended to raise this money for the wall. The campaign was intended to raise money to help President Donald Trump, not associated with it, let me make that clear, fulfill a campaign promise to build a border wall. Well, he didn't say anything about using private money. Instead, prosecutors allege that Bannon and his team profited off the arrangement. Now, I'm going to give you a few thoughts here. The president had nothing to do with this. There's no indication. He's not been accused. There's no reason to believe that he had anything to do with it. The mainstream media are using this as an excuse to smear the president. That's one of the reasons why it's sad. Even if it's not true, it's certainly a bad day. Press are having a field day. I told you about that. They're parading everybody out that has served some jail time and trying to link it all together that tie with the president. Which these people, and I'll give you a couple of quick examples. Michael Cohen, the president's former lawyer, he's serving time right now. Paul Manafort, he's serving time right now. There's two things those guys have in common, and Bannon may be one of them eventually. I don't know. But Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort have two things in common. One, they both have a connection to the president. Michael Cohen was his personal lawyer, no denying that, and Paul Manafort was the campaign manager during the convention, pretty much only to make sure that President Trump, during the Republican convention, got the delegates he rightly deserved to get. He was let go after that. But they have so they have one thing in common there. They both have a connection to the president. The second thing they have in common is that the crimes that they are serving time for, and this is very important because you won't hear this from MSNBC. They're not even talking about that. You may or may not even hear it from Fox News. That's why you got to watch shows like John Martin Talks. That's why you got to support fighters, like I'm always saying. Not everybody can be a fighter, but everybody can support fighters. Check out our sponsorship link, Big Daddy Unlimited, for all your Second Amendment needs in the description of our show. Look at that link, and don't forget, sign up for the giveaway. It's in that link as well. One lucky listener at the end of the month is going to win all of these prizes that you will see pictured at the beginning of the show. Check it out. But the other thing they have in common, Michael Cohen, Paul Manafort, and maybe Steve Bannon and the rest of these guys, I say maybe, is that the charges that those two, Manafort and Cohen, are in jail for had zero to do with the president. In fact, in Manafort's case, he was charged with tax evasion and some other things that were crimes he committed before he ever met the president, let alone actually worked for him. And Cohen is charged with trying to profiteer, basically, influence peddling and tax evasion after basically Trump had pretty much let him go. So they had those two things in common. They do have a connection to the president, yes, but their crimes have zero to do with the president, and you won't hear that anytime. But this Bannon thing gives the mainstream media, at a very critical time in the election, the chance to parade all of this out. That's why I say it's a very bad, bad day. Now, is it fair? Here's the question. As I said, it has nothing to do with the president. But is it fair game to bring this up? And I would have to reluctantly say, yes, it is. It is fair to bring this up because Donald Trump is president of the United States, running for re-election. There are people associated with him that have either been convicted of crimes or now being accused of them. It is fair game. It is. But my issue is it's all one-sided. The press, for instance, never mentions people like the Biden family. Basically, if you look at Joe Biden, even a cursory look at Joe Biden, his family, the Sopranos would be envious of the success that the Bidens have had. Let's put it that way. And and we'll talk more about that later. But there's skeletons in all these people's closets on the Democratic side that you never hear about. Kamala, the goddess that is Kamala, I tell you, she's like Littlefinger, man. She is, if you want to understand Kamala Harris, all you really need to understand is that she will do anything for power. Anything. And I mean anything. But there's so many skeletons in her closet that aren't even talked about in the mainstream media. Only places like John Martin Talks will bring that up, because she's kept people. I mean, all you got to do is go back and look at the video of Tulsi Gabbard in the 2020 debates when she accused Kamala Harris of all kind of things. Kamala Harris did not defend herself at all. And you check that out. And like, you know, people are arrested in the Carter administration. I mean, one of the things, Jimmy Carter, he's a great guy. A lousy president, but a great guy. But he brought what they call the Georgia Mafia up there with him. And there is like a litany of people that were indicted and arrested under Jimmy Carter's administration. But you never hear that when they bring him up. They just talk about how great he is. And man, don't even get me started on the Clintons, man. I mean, they don't have a lot of charges against them because everybody gets suicided before. So the problem, yes, it's fair game to bring up Steve Bannon. Yes, it's fair game to talk about his relationship to the president, even Cohen and Manafort. They don't do it in an honest way. And the biggest problem I have is they don't bring up the opposite side of the aisle at all. And they literally come out and say, and just to give you the best example, that, oh, one thing about the Obama administration, there were no scandals. No scandals. Oh my God, man. I mean, we could do a week's worth of shows just on the scandals. But they, you know that term, without evidence, they'll say there was no scandals in the Obama administration without evidence, because there's tons of evidence. So that's the problem I have with the whole thing. Back to the story. Acting U.S. Attorney Audrey Strauss said in a statement, the defendants defrauded hundreds of thousands of donors, capitalizing on their interest in funding a border wall to raise millions of dollars. If that's true, it's sad. Under the false pretense that all the money would be spent on construction, while repeatedly assuring that donors that Brian Kofelich, the founder and face, he's the disabled veteran, public face of the We Build the Wall, would not be paid a cent, the defendants secretly schemed to pass hundreds of thousands of dollars to Kofelich, I hope I'm saying his name right, which he used to fund his lavish lifestyle. I don't know if that's true or not. It seems a bit, I don't know. I don't want to say it seems true, but whatever, you be decide. Well, he said that he said, we thank the USPIS, the U.S. Postal Service investigators, what they're talking about, for their partnership investigating this case, and we remain dedicated to rooting out and prosecuting fraud wherever we find it. I have to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen. It seems like there's a lot of smoke around this. It really does. The president must have felt some of this, because he has not been on board with this group from the very beginning. Matter of fact, he has been critical, even been criticized by some people on the right for being critical of what they were doing down there with this privately funded Build the Wall. I don't know if the president had knowledge of this in any way, shape, or form, but you know, he has pretty good instincts. President Trump, one thing about him, has pretty good instincts. So when he began to criticize this, it was a red flag for me. Not saying there was any connection, but it does seem like there's some smoke. We'll see if there's some fire. We'll see. Kelly McEnany, she's the press secretary for President Trump, she said in a statement, President Trump has not been involved with Steve Bannon since the campaign and the early part of the administration, and he does not know the people involved with this project. The president, as I said, was opposed to the project. Now, if this is true, and I'm hoping it's not, I am absolutely hoping it's not true, but if this is true, they need to be held accountable, as this hurts the cause, totally hurts the cause of patriotic Americans. It hurts the cause of shows like John Martin Talks. It absolutely hurts the president. And all I can say on this is, I say, I'm asking you to support me and everything else. So I'm full bore going. I'm not going to, sugarcoat this in any way. I just know what I know about myself and human nature. To thine own self be true. You have to be true to yourself, or in order to not bear false to any man. Okay. So for me, I have to be honest about myself. personally. And some of you have watched the show for a long time. We can get into it later. But if you hadn't, first of all, howdy, how are you? Welcome. You're in the right place now. The truth starts here. You won't find anybody who's more honest. I care about your anonymity. I'm not going to talk about you personally. But me, I'll tell you, you got a question about me, just ask me. I'll answer it. I don't care. I really don't care. Because I have to live by that to my own self be true. If I didn't, let's just put it this way, I wouldn't be here. All right, we're going to move along. As I say, I hope that that story, that all that smoke does not produce any fire. This has been in the news literally. Every speaker, it seems like, in the DNC has talked about the U.S. Post Office, and you may be wondering why. I think this they probably know a little bit about this latest survey here that shows exactly why they're a little panicky about the post office. Biden voters, this is a USA Today story, Biden voters twice as likely than Trump supporters to vote by mail in November, the survey in USA Today is reporting it. More than 1/3 of Americans intend to vote by mail in November presidential election, but Democratic voters are much more bullish about the option than Republicans. That seems to be true, according to a new survey. Let me just give you some unscientific, I guess, evidence if you want that. We just had a primary here in Florida on Tuesday. Now, I normally vote at the polls, but lately I've been voting, early voting, not absentee voting, but early voting, primarily because doing the show and covering election stuff and stuff like that, and some of my work with the as state committee man for the Republican Party here in Alachua County, where I live. Basically, it makes me, I have a lot to do on election day is what it amounts to. So I've been voting, not absentee, but early voting. But locally here, we just had a primary. And in Alachua County, it just got reported that we don't do mail out voting. We just do absentee. Now, they may go to that. Who knows? But the absentee balloting, which is a form of mail-in voting, was up by it tripled. It basically tripled here in Alachua County. Now, I've not looked at the Florida numbers. Florida tends to have a lot of absentee ballots in general because older people vote, or the highest percentage of people in the past that voted absentee, and military as well. And we have both here in Florida. A lot of older people, military bases, and something like that. So Florida is one of the top absentee voting places in the United States, but it went up by it tripled here locally. So it definitely going to go up come November, no matter what happens. And of course, there's a big difference, and I always got to say this because the mainstream media they talk about educating people. And I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but the DNC and the mainstream media are in cahoots because they are running CNN and both MSNBC. I've noticed this. They have programs, MSNBC's over the top with it, about mail-in voting, get your voting done. They even have a little slogan. I can't remember what it is right now. But the speakers at the convention are saying the same slogan. You think that's a coincidence? I think not. But there's a difference between absentee voting and mail-in voting. Most of you already know this by now, but we've got to educate people. Battling ignorance and apathy daily here at John Martin Talks. Absentee balloting is when you request a ballot from your local supervisor of elections. Every state is a little bit different, but you get your ballot in a certain way. You have to request it. There is an accountability to it. There's ways for it to be turned in, and there are ways for it to be counting, and it's been being done for decades pretty much all across the nation, and it's pretty successful. I'm not saying there aren't some issues with it. There's issues with every kind of voting. That's why we need to protect the vote in every way, shape, or form. But the mail-in voting, straight mail-in voting is different because there's no request made for ballot. They just blanketly send ballots out to every registered voter, whether they're dead or not. As President Trump said, it could be cats voting, but I tell you, I trust the cat vote better than the rat vote because that's what I'm worried about. The rats out there that will take advantage of it. But there is a difference. Get educated on the process in whatever state you live in. I'm not opposed to absentee balloting, mail-in voting, and I'll get more on that in just a moment. Adamantly opposed to it. 37% of registered voters, according to this poll, and this poll was done like 500,000 people polled. The margin of error is like 2%, which is really low for a poll. So this is probably true. 37% of registered voters said they are likely to vote by mail in November election by receiving a mail-in ballot. Think about that, 37% mail-in ballot, and either mailing it back or returning it in person, according to a new survey released Tuesday by the Democracy Fund at UCLA Nationscape Project. Now, if that happens, that could overwhelm the post office. There is no question about it. It could overwhelm this local supervisor of elections. The Democrats, and these are my words, but they're true nonetheless, the Democrats know, they talk about, oh, we can do this, that, and other, fund the post office. I mean, they're just on it, right? They know for a fact that there's nothing, I mean, government and the post office works pretty slow. Government works really slow. Post office is even doubled down on that. Do you really believe that you can make major changes in the post office in the next 75 days? I mean, really a lot, really it's like half that, because that's when November 3rd is, like 75 days. But they would have to have all this in place because early voting in some states starts in the next 2 or 3 weeks before the first debate even. So there's just, the Democrats know that there's no way. I'm not saying the post office doesn't need to be short, there's some improvements don't need to be made. And certainly supervisor of elections office, some of them are good, some of them not. We got mixed bag here in Florida. Certainly there needs to be improvements made there, but it's too late. It's too late. And the Democrats know this. So why are they pushing it knowing it can't be fixed for the election? They're counting on it to be screwed up, because they're going to exploit it. They're exploiting it as an issue now, saying Donald Trump's trying to suppress the vote because of the problems at the post office. I guess he's going to try to suppress the vote with the problems at the elections like down in Palm Beach and places like that are notorious, run by Democrats. You ever notice that they only have problems at the areas run by Democrats? They never find, if a Republican is like losing an election, you notice they never just find some ballots floating around in the trunk of a car somewhere. If a Democrat's ahead, they never find anything. If the Republicans are ahead, all of a sudden, well, what about these here ballots, man? The stork dropped them in along with that baby over there you didn't abort. That kind of thing. I mean, it's just crazy. Give me an example where a Republican was trailing and they found ballots to put that person over the top. There may be one out there, but I have never seen it. There are literally hundreds of stories about the reverse side of that. But the Democrats know all this. They're counting on it to be a fiasco because they're going to exploit it. And I'm going to give you my worst case scenario here in just a moment. Check my time, doing all right. Among them, back to the polling, among them are the people who are going to vote by mail, either absentee or by mail, in general. Among them, 48% of voters who plan to vote for Democratic presumptive nominee Joe Biden said they are likely to vote by mail. There's your answer. That's why it's on the lips of every speaker, because half the Democrats polled said they plan to vote in some form or fashion by mail. So no wonder the Democrats are worried about this, because Trump voters are going to show up to the polls. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. For Democratic presumptive Joe Biden, that's more than twice the 23% of voters backing President Trump. So only 23% of voters backing President Trump said they are likely to vote by mail. That probably, if you dive into those numbers a bit deeper, probably older people who have been traditionally absentee balloting. In general, now this could all be turned on its head come November 3rd because of the pandemic that we're in right now. Yeah, I'm starting to say it. A lot of you listeners have been talking about pandemic, and I'm becoming a true believer that it is somewhat of a pandemic. Certainly, the Democrats are exploiting it. There's no question about that. But generally speaking, and like I say, this could change, early voting, for the most part, Democrats win in early voting as far as the turnout, stuff like that, the research. Absentee balloting, Republicans outperform big time, and there's always a big time absentee chase. And on day of voting, Republicans usually outperform Democrats. So the Democrats, if 48% of them are now switching from early voting to voting by mail, it's got to make the DNC nervous, man. It's got to make them a bit nervous. So let's get on this as well. So among the 48%, that's more than, talking about the Republicans, 23% said that they're going to vote. Now, who is smarter? Who's the smarter ones? The 48% of the Democrats that are going to vote by mail, or the basically 80% of Republicans that are going to vote at the polls? Who's smarter? You know, I'll let you decide that. I mean, I get it voting at the polls. I've always been an at the polls guy for the most part. The numbers underscore the heightened, but I'm going to give you a warning about voting at the polls in just a moment. The numbers underscore the heightened political polarization that has consumed mail-in voting, while Trump has railed on universal mail-in voting, characterizing it without evidence. Here's their term. That term. That's a poll-tested term, I guarantee you. Without evidence as more fraudulent than in-person voting and a plot by Democrats to rig the election. Without evidence, man. That pretty much sums up the attack, doesn't it, on Democrats, on Donald J. Trump? They attacked Donald J. Trump at every level, basically without evidence. They literally impeached the dude without evidence. I mean, think about that. But yet every time Donald Trump says it, without evidence. I mean, Donald Trump could literally say, I'd be willing to bet you the sun's going to come up tomorrow. And they'd go, well, without evidence. I mean, it's just, wow. They never say that to Democrats. That's another thing. You talk about, Democrats and stuff. And do you ever see a Democrat say anything and a news article followed up by saying, without evidence? I mean, the things they accused Donald Trump over the last few days at the DNC, man, you could put the without evidence tag on everything they say, but you never hear that followed by anything Barack Obama says, right? Let alone the Clintons. I mean, I guess people are afraid to get suicided if they say without evidence. You did. Several states expanded mail-in voting for safety reasons amid the coronavirus pandemic, fueling record vote-by-mail turnout in recent state primaries and likely again in November. Rob Griffin, who is a research director of the Voter Study Group, he said, at least for right now, so he was part of this polling process, he said, at least for right now, we're seeing some relatively big differences between different demographics and political groups. Let me tell you, it is going to happen. Mail-in voting is going to happen in some form. Obviously, absentee ballot is already happening, and without a doubt, it's going to increase. It's been increasing steadily over the last few decades. Absentee balloting has, early voting as well. So it's already the cat's out of the bag in that. But it could get overwhelming, and that's the problem. What we have to do is try to prepare as best we can for absentee balloting to increase and try to fight the mail-out vote, period. We got to fight that because we're not going to beat, no, I don't think we should beat absentee balloting. I don't have a problem with that. It's going to be tough to handle this huge increase that is coming. There's no doubt about it. 48% of registered voters who plan to vote for Trump said they will vote in person on Election Day, while another 22% said they will vote early in person. Among Biden supporters, 28% said they intend to vote in person on Election Day. That's a pretty low number. Think about that. While another 19% say they will vote in person. So like half the Democrats, as I said earlier, are planning to mail in their vote. No wonder the Democrats are nervous. But let me give you I told you I would give you a warning. I'm always trying to help. I wish this wasn't true, but I guarantee you it is going to be true. Be prepared for voter suppression if you vote at the polls. And I know most of you are going to vote at the polls. I get it. You'd crawl through glass to vote for Donald Trump. And I'm with you. I'm with you, man. I appreciate that. But here's something you better be prepared for. They're going to try to make it as hard on you as possible. Because, the deep state still controls most of the federal government. And they control a lot of these local places. They dadgum sure control where I vote. There ain't no doubt about that. They're going to make it hard for you. You're going to be waiting in line, that kind of thing. And on top of that, especially in Republican-known precincts, I'd be willing to bet you that there's going to be some intimidation out there from Black Lives Matter, from Antifa, for that thing. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just trying to prepare you because I just predict that's going to happen. I wish it wasn't true. I'm afraid that I'm absolutely spot on about this. So just be prepared. And you supervisor of elections out there, you need to be prepared. And you local law enforcement, you need to be prepared too, because I think there's going to be shenanigans at the polls come Election Day to suppress Donald Trump voters. I really believe that. Some Republican leaders have openly worried Trump's strong rhetoric has discouraged Republican voters from requesting mail ballots in key battleground states like Florida, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. The Trump campaign, in coordination with state parties, has promoted absentee ballots in these states. It is definitely happening here in Florida. There's no doubt about it. There's an acceptance that absentee balloting is going to increase, and there's going to be a big push for collecting these absentee or getting them back in. Let me give you a quick tidbit because I'm always trying to help. If you don't want to get like calls about voting, have you voted, all that kind of stuff. The easiest way to get rid of all that calls? Turn in your absentee ballot early as possible. If you got early voting, which is a fact, if you're going to do it, go vote, because electronics, the deal now, the technology can trace your ballot, and once it's in, they'll quit calling you. Generally speaking, they'll quit knocking on your door. So if you don't want that to happen, I'm just giving you a little tidbit, turn in that absentee. If you're absentee balloting, here's what you need to do: get it the minute you get it, fill it out, and send it in. I'm not trying to discourage you from voting for the polls. I'm simply saying, if you're going to vote absentee, turn it in as quickly as possible. And that will, then you'll be done. And then you can campaign for then you can campaign for Trump without worrying, right? All right, check my time. Yeah, pretty good here. 25% of all voters who said they voted on election day during 2016 presidential election now say they will vote by mail in November. According to the survey, 20% of voters who cast ballots early 4 years ago said they will vote by mail this time. That is a big, big deal. And we're going to close with this right here. The divide is starkest among political parties as far as who's going to vote by mail. 47% of self-identified Democrats say they intend to vote by mail, compared to 28% of Republicans and independent voters. 47% of self-identified Democrats. Now you know why they're talking about it, everything at the deal. Here's my worst case scenario, and God, I hope this doesn't happen except for the part where Donald Trump wins. This is what I see potentially happening, and it could be devastating for this nation. Worst case scenario to me, and when I say this, understand, I want Trump to win, period. But Trump wins on election night. Trump wins by, the Electoral College on election night. But mail-in ballots continue to come. Quite a few states actually have in their absentee ballots, I don't know about this crazy mail-out vote, that is something that, is unpredictable. But in the absentee ballots, quite a few states allow the absentee ballots, as long as they're postmarked before a certain date, they could come in as late as 3 days after the election and still be counted. That is the rule of absentee ballots in many, many places. Now think about that. If Donald Trump were to, the mail-out vote, imagine how crazy that would be. If he were to win on election night, but over the course of the next few days, the votes come in and it's close, or Biden actually overcomes it, God help us if that's true, then what happens? There's going to be all kind of challenges, going to end up to the Supreme Court. And one of my listeners actually chimed into something I hadn't had time to investigate, but if it were to go past Inauguration Day, she's actually said that there's some thing in their provision that Nancy Pelosi, who's third in line, would be interim president. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm going to investigate that. That's going to give me heartburn all weekend, so I promise to look at it. But it could get really, really bad with this, so we got to be on top of this. All right, we got about 3 or 4 more minutes left. I got to bring you this quick story about Cher. I actually like Cher. I don't like her politics at all. She's a tremendous talent. There's just no doubt about it. I saw her in concert out in Vegas a couple of times, I think. She is phenomenal. There's just no doubt about it. I give credit where credit is due. But Cher, according to Microsoft News Network, Cher denied while trying to volunteer at the post office. It said, "It wasn't snow or rain nor heat nor gloom of night that's stopping Cher from working at the local post office. It's bureaucracy." In other words, big government is stopping the ultra-liberal Cher from, I guess, living her dream of working at the post office. I don't know. On August 19th, the diva tweeted that she tried to volunteer at 2 Southern California post offices, but she was denied. Now, is she looking for a new husband? I mean, that's my first thought. Because, you know, Cher, she found a husband, the guy that kept delivering pizzas to her house. She married him one time. She married Greg Allman for like a minute one time, too. So Cher will marry at the drop of a hat. So maybe, you know, got a good job. You like a man in uniform or a woman. I don't know what her tastes are like, but maybe she's tired of pizzas and she's looking for a new husband, I guess. But she initially wondered via tweet, can people volunteer at the post office? And I don't know if they can or not. I never really thought about volunteering at the post office. I mean, they pay pretty good. But it says, after some research, she got her answer. She tweeted this. This is what her rendition of the phone call. Okay, call 2 post offices in Malibu. You know, they're looking for celebrities to volunteer. How many celebrities want to volunteer in the post office? It says, call 2 post offices in Malibu. They were polite. I said, hi, this is Cher. And they probably went, who? Cher ain't been in the limelight much. But she said, hi, this is Cher, and I would like to know if you ever take volunteers. Lady said she didn't know and gave me the number of the supervisor. Cher, very persistent. She's eager. She said, because if you ever watched her dance, you know she's an eager beaver, no doubt about it. But Cher then called the supervisor and identified herself and her purpose. The supervisor, though, gave her disappointing news, telling her she could not immediately work there because they need fingerprints and a background check. So she might be worried about the background. Maybe there's some truth to that song. What's that one song she had? Gypsies, trance and thieves, something like that, right? Maybe she's worried about that. But the icon says she's serious about wanting to help. I'm sure she is. Now, wasn't she one of the people that said she'd leave the country if Donald Trump got elected? Well, apparently she's still hanging out in Malibu. Where's she going to go if we make them cry again on November 3rd and Donald Trump gets reelected? Will she leave the country? That might make things better for just a moment. But let me just tell you, we're always trying to help here at John Martin Talks. So I want to put this out to share, right out there. If you're really looking for some volunteer work, I could use an intern. I'd be happy to have Cher as my intern. Now, she got to be quiet because some of them sequin things she runs around, at least when I saw her in Vegas, make quite an impression and probably noise when it's really quiet. But Cher, if you're looking for volunteer work, an internship is available right here at JMT. I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, share it with others. Check out our YouTube channel, spell it out, John Martin Talks. Remember the prize pack giveaway. Go to the description of the show, John Martin giveaway, sign up. One lucky listener will get this. Please check out our sponsorship link, Big Daddy Unlimited. We're in the Big Daddy BDU studios right here. You can help me and help yourself. Check out that link, 99 cents first, free, literally free trial, $10 after. And yes, we do get proceeds of that. But check it out, sponsorship link, Big Daddy Unlimited. I will pray for you. You pray for my family. Let's all pray for this great nation. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.